What's up everyone, Patrick here, welcome back. Moving on to another example dealing with multiplying polynomials. So in this particular question, we're told the quantity of tickets sold at a concert every weekend is given with this relation here, Q equals 300 minus 60x, where x represents the price per ticket. And given that information in part A, we have to find an expression for price in terms of quantity. And then in part B, if revenue equals ticket price times the quantity, we have to find an expanded expression for revenue in terms of either price or quantity. So two different expressions here. One's going to be only in terms of the price variable. This one's going to be only in terms of the quantity variable. So let me actually erase this here, give myself some room. Let's start off with talking about this. So we have the quantity equals 300 minus 60x over here. Now, this Q here represents the quantity or the number of tickets sold, and then the X represents the price per ticket. And notice that this, intuitively, this equation here makes sense. Because if you start increasing the price, okay, so let's say that the ticket price is like $1. What's the quantity of people going to the concert then going to be? Well, if we plug in 1 over here, we'll have 60 times 1, which is 60. 300 minus 60 would give us 240. Okay, so if the ticket price is $1, 240 people will go. Now, what if we increase the ticket price to 2? Well, with the laws of supply and demand, just intuitively, it makes sense that less people will go. And notice that it's shown in this equation. So if we plug in 2 here, 6 times 2, 120. 300 minus 120 would give us a quantity of 180. So we increase the ticket price, less people go, right? Versus this situation over here. So intuitively, this expression for the quantity, relating the quantity to the ticket price, does make sense. But what we got to do in part A is we have to find an expression for the price in terms of quantity. So notice that this expression, it's an expression for, let's write this in words, this here is an expression for quantity. Because notice that the quantity is by itself, so Q, the quantity equals, we have an expression for the quantity in terms of price. Expression for quantity in terms of price. So just be careful with the wording here, right? This expression that we're given an expression for the quantity in terms of the price. The price is like the independent variable, and then the quantity is the dependent variable, right? This is like the Y, and then that's the X. But what they want in part A is the reverse of that, or the inverse of that. Find an expression for price in terms of quantity. So what they want is they want the X to be by itself. They want an expression for the price in terms of some kind of expression here. And then the quantity variable is going to be there. So what we have to do is we basically have to take this, rearrange it in a way where we can isolate for that X. And there's different ways to do it. You could bring the 300 over, but then you're going to have a negative 60 still in front of the X. And I'd rather have a positive number. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this expression, bring it over to the left side. So it would turn into positive 60x. And then this Q here, which is a positive, I'm going to bring over. So we'd end up with 300 minus Q, like that. And then we want to get the X by itself. Well, what we can do, divide both sides. We have to divide this whole thing by 60, like that. This cancels out, and we end up with X by itself, and it's equal to 300 minus Q over 60, like that. Right? So now we have the price, an expression for the price in terms of the quantity. So we just switched it up. Now, another format this can be in is instead of just having one big fraction here, you could just split it up into two fractions. Then you'll have Q over 60. 300 over 60 gives us 5, and then there's like a 1 in front, so we could rewrite this as 1 over 60 Q. Like that. So this and this, they're the exact same thing, right? Just written in a different way. And then you don't even have to put the 1 over 60 here. You could just keep it as Q. It could be like 5 minus Q over 60. The reason why I'm showing you this different format is for part B, we're going to have to expand it and have a quadratic anyway. So I just want to keep this format as well. So let's actually write both of these over here. So either of these answers, they're the same. Okay, so just know how to go from one to the other, because maybe in a multiple choice test, they might give you this answer instead, right? But they are the same thing. So we're done part A. We've expressed the price in terms of the quantity. Each of those are the same thing. So now what we have to do in part B is we have to find expressions for the revenue. Now revenue in general, even though it mentioned it in the question, it didn't necessarily have to. You should be fairly comfortable. We've done a bunch of questions dealing with revenue where we know revenue is basically the quantity of items sold, whatever product you're selling. In this case, they're concert tickets, times the price per item, right? So in this case, it's going to be the ticket price over here, and then this is going to be the number or the quantity of tickets. Now, what they want is they want the revenue to be only in terms of price. So remember, the X is the price, or the ticket price. And then Q is the number of tickets sold, or the quantity. So they want two different revenue equations. They want a revenue expression only in terms of the price. So it's only going to be in terms of X, or they want a revenue expression only in terms of the quantity. So let's start off by creating a revenue expression in terms of price. Okay, so how would we do that? Well, we would have the R equals, let's plug in just the variables here for now. So the quantity is the Q, and then the ticket price is the X. So we'll have QX like that. But if we're making it only in terms of the price, well, notice we have this Q variable here. We have to get rid of it. So how can we get rid of this Q? Well, notice that here we have Q in terms of X. So what we can do is we can take this expression and plug it in for this Q over here, because they're the same thing, right? Q is equal to this, so we could just plug in what Q is equal over here. We have the X on the outside, and now notice we have a revenue expression only in terms of the price. Notice that the only variable is the price, which is the X, right? And so from here, they want an expanded expression. So the X, let's actually bring in front. And then when we expand it, we would end up with 300x minus 60x squared, like that. Or if you want to put the x squared first, either of those are the same thing. So that ends up being the revenue expression, the expanded expression. Notice we expanded it, right? We didn't leave it in factored form. Only in terms of X. Notice the only variable there is the ticket price. So that's the revenue in terms of the ticket price. But they also want, let's erase all of this. They also want the revenue in terms of the quantity. So let's rewrite that. Quantity times ticket price. They also want it in terms of the quantity, so notice in this particular case, because they want it in terms of quantity, we'll keep the Q there, but we have to sub in for this X. What can we sub in for this X? Well, what we got in part A. either of these, I'm going to sub in this one. That's why I wanted to get that other expression, because then we could expand it easier. 1 over 60 q. So notice now everything is in terms of the quantity. Everything is in terms of the q. Right? I subbed in this for x over here. And expanding it, 5 times q is just 5q, and then this, the q squared, so it would be minus 1 over 60 q squared, like that. Or if you want to rearrange it, that's another way. You could also put the q squared on top, so that would be negative q squared over 60 plus 5q, like that. And actually another way to do it is if we multiply it by this, it's not really going to be expanded, but let me just show you in case maybe something like this comes up. It's a multiple choice or something. So instead of plugging in this expression, if we plug in this is like q over 1, right? So q times this, we got to expand that q in here, so it would be 300q minus q squared over 1 times 60 is just 60. Okay, so this is not really expanded, right? These are the expanded versions over here, but this and this, they're actually the same thing, right? All of these circled expressions, they're the same thing. All right, so that's the revenue in terms of the quantity. This here is the revenue in terms of the ticket price.